I'm going to do a short video on how to get started with ZenHub. So ZenHub is the tool we will be using for our Jira flow. It hooks directly into your GitHub. In order to use it, you're going to first have to go to GitHub and sign in, ZenHub.com and sign in with your GitHub ID. It uses GitHub ID, so it should already be pretty set up for you guys. You just have to sign in. There's a browser extension for Chrome you can download. Otherwise, you can just use app.zenhub.com to see it if you don't want to get it plugged in directly to your GitHub. Before we go through app.zenhub.com, let me just show you really quick what it would look like in GitHub itself. So here's the Cintio slid, and if you have the Chrome extension installed, you get this extra tab up at the top here called ZenHub. You also get a couple other nice features like smart repo switching and things like that. Basically, it's built on top of GitHub issues, so all things will come through GitHub issues. And the reason why ZenHub exists is it allows us to do cross-repo issue tracking and Jira flow. I know that GitHub has project boards, but ZenHub is like that, but much more like Jira, like better functionality, epics, things like that. It's much nicer for tracking and everything like that. So if you click ZenHub here, it kind of shows you, this is kind of what a board would look like. This is a board loading. It's fully fleshed out already. So I've already set up the boards for Slid and for Slid server. Slid server is an empty repo right now. Rudy's going to be building out the backend server, but I've at least set up the board. So this is what it looks like in GitHub. Let's actually go back over to zenhub.com, app.zenhub.com, so you can see what the board looks like in that view, because it's just the board. Okay, so to get started, we'd sign in with GitHub. Okay, so it's going to ask me to select the organization. For now, all of the WCB work for Foxconn, which is the Windows Collaborative Display, as well as the OTA firmware, will be under Cintio. In the future, we will migrate to Soda Labs repo as we decide at a good time to do that. For all Spark Point work, we're going to be setting up boards in Soda Labs. Okay, so we've selected the Cintio HQ, and we're going to find a repo. So the way ZenHub works is it actually is set up to do cross-repo views. If you're the Android side, you can just do slid. Notice if we type slid, there's actually 3 here, slid design, which I actually don't think it's used. I should clean that up. But there's slid, which is the Android side, and slid server, which is the backend side. Backend and frontend, I guess. But let's take a look. You can actually switch between the two of them, and slid and slid server are actually connected. So it doesn't really matter which one we go into, because they're technically tied together, but let's just go into slid for now. Okay, so this is what we get. Basically, we get the development. So this board, if you go in here, it's already collapsed for you, so you can collapse panels and kind of open new panels. And I've gone ahead from my own view, and maybe it's different for you guys, but in the settings up here, I've chosen to hide the closed. Everything else can stay the same. The reason is we already have a done, and then closed is basically, done is for when we're done with the sprint and we can review, and then closed is when it's not even in the sprint, it's completely done. For you guys, you'll never really need closed. Closed is really just for me, I guess, but yeah, so let's, for the purposes of you guys, it's mostly going to look like this, where development backlog here is basically, sorry, taking a step back. I've organized the board after reading a tremendous amount of documentation from ZenHub themselves, and they've kind of helped define what a good flow would be in their system. So you can see at the top there's 2 repos right here. At the top it's slid and slid server. That's because these repos are connected, which means that in this board we can see both flows at the same time for both repos. Let's talk about the labels real quick. So there's actually a whole bunch of labels. Right now I'm only using 3 on the current issues, but I don't know if you can see the labels here. Yeah, you can't really see the labels here. But we have, let me go back here and you can see them in this view. let's just wait for issues to load. It's a little bit slow these days. There we go. Okay, so here's the labels. Pretty straightforward on most of these, but there are a few that I think are Jira-specific terminology that you might not be familiar with. So bug is bug. Bug is pretty straightforward. Bugs are for labels that are fixing something that's already been implemented but may have been discovered to have some bug related to it. Duplicates are mostly for you guys, so if you notice that a ticket was created for tasking, but the work's actually already been done by another ticket or was involved in another ticket, you can mark it as duplicate when you move it to done, and then that will let me know that we're creating tickets that don't need to be created. It'll also let us talk about if the work was done accidentally under another ticket and for what reason. Pretty straightforward. So epic is for epics. If you're familiar with Jira at all, epics are these bigger buckets that don't really make sense to put in a sprint because they're too big for a sprint. They span multiple sprints. Epics will work hand in hand with milestones, but so epics, unlike a milestone, which is more around like what you're going to deliver, an epic is more about the feature itself. So an epic would be like V2 design refresh. Anything that has to do with the V2 design refresh will be under that epic. It just kind of helps you kind of group things together a little bit more to kind of make things more clear. Any new features, new requests, things like that, enhancements will be under feature. Those are new work, no bugs because it's brand new. But it's a single task that can be done within a day, 2 days, 3 days, or within the matter of a sprint. High priority is just an extra label that we have here that we can just add on to note that this particular task is a high priority task. We don't really have the notion of priorities in our current flow, mostly because tickets are either going to be high priority or they're going to be prioritized by top down. So we're going to try to use a top down just ordering. We're not going to order by alphabetical or anything like that. But typically, you know, when we plan the sprints, if it's a high priority, it'll go first. If it's not a high priority, it'll go next. Pretty straightforward. So needs design is another label for you guys. So if you're working on a task or if you get assigned a task and you notice that the design isn't done, mark it as needs design. This will be checked every single day. And any of those tasks that needs design will be pushed back to the design team immediately so that we can get that design because that is blocking you guys. It's just a quick and easy way for you to delegate and designate that this particular task is being blocked. It's really good to keep it on the board as well. You should be able to ping everyone and say, hey Hui, I need some designs, or hey Son, I need some designs, but it's good to note that from a planning perspective, we should always label these. I'm going to skip over Spike real quick, and I'm going to go to tech debt just because it's really easy. So tech debt is basically anything that we know we need to do that's not really impactful to the user's experience of the final product, but it's more of a technical debt for architectural cleanup or efficiency or things like this. So it's more from a purely development perspective of things that we know we need to do, but it probably won't have dramatic impact on the user, but it's more for scalability of the code base. I'm pretty sure most people are familiar with the term tech debt. Okay, so the last one, and the one that's actually new to me, is Spike. So this was coming from ZenHub themselves. It's in a lot of Agile documentation. Spike is basically a label for work that is research work or experimental work. So if you want to test out something and you're like, well, this isn't really like slated, but I want to test this out because if it works, it could be better, you know, or maybe we're just researching something. Spike is what that ticket is for, that label is for. So another big reason why we want to label all these things is we can monitor how much time is being spent on research work or experimental work, we can also monitor how much work is being done on bug work. And I want to clarify, it's not to monitor you guys and like make sure you're on task as much, but it's more for the planning, so that we know from the planning side if we're going to be able to meet our deadlines. At the end of the day, we want to make sure your jobs are easier and more fluid. We don't want to make more work for you, we want to make less work for you and make it easier for you guys. So this is kind of what we've come up with so far. Let me know if you guys have questions as we use this, and we'll kind of figure out along the way if this works for our team. Okay, so that's the labels. The labels are pretty important. So let's go back over to the app.zenhub.com. Okay, so now we can talk about the pipelines. So pipelines are these, if you see over here on the right, it says add a pipeline. So we really probably don't need to add any more, but these are the pipelines that I've decided on, that's kind of been set up also a little bit by ZenHub. So let's break it down. So let me expand all these real quick. There's some issues in here that already, just to kind of get things started, we're working with ZenHub to get some stuff started. But okay, so left to right. Development backlog. Development backlog is for any task coming in. It's the default one. So by default, ZenHub, when you create an issue, it defaults to the leftmost pipeline. Development backlog is work that will need to happen within the next 6 months, but isn't necessarily slated for the sprint, but also hasn't been decided that we don't need to worry about it. Right, so it's just basically new issues, new tickets, new issues. It's backlog, but it's not pending backlog. It's like we will put it into a sprint. So let's collapse that one. So epics are just going to be in one pipeline. Epics basically again are groupings of other issues, and this is just to kind of help us flow through things a little bit more logically. These are bigger deliverables that we want to achieve. So for example, you can kind of see now here's a great example of how you can see by repo. If we look at slid or slid server up here, you can actually see slid number 354. That's specific to the Android app, and then slid server is specific to the server app. These are currently not in any particular order. Epics don't have a priority right now. This is just getting started. But basically, these are going to be like V2 design refresh. Any ticket that has to do with V2 design refresh will go in here. The design refresh, in this particular case, a design refresh is also going to be a milestone because that's a major deliverable, but we're going to test out the epic as well. Another epic for server, for example, would be foundational infrastructure. The reason why we want to group that is because typically that's the first thing we want to work on, is the infrastructural setup. Like how are we going to do routing? How are we going to do connections between all the pieces, right? Those are decisions that are usually decided on early. They will evolve over time, but I want to make an epic just for the initial deliverable of the infrastructure. So anyway, that's kind of epics. This is a work in progress. We'll play with this and see how we like it. Usually both of these will be collapsed, as well as the icebox. So the icebox is basically where we'll put any issues that we've just decided, hey, we need to keep it as an issue, but we really have no plans to work on it, not yet at least. It's just good to keep track of all these ideas or notions that, hey, this is something we should think about, but it's not really slated for work. So again, you probably won't look at the icebox too much. It's more for planning purposes. So really the first three are all for planning purposes. For as an engineer, for your daily work, whether you're on back-end, front-end, or Android, most of your flow will just be in the next 4 pipelines. Sprint backlog, in progress, review QA, and done. This is the sprint cycle. So the sprint backlog is basically where all the tickets for the sprint get put at the beginning of the sprint. So basically at the end of the sprint, we'll have a retrospective, and we'll also have a sprint kickoff for the next week. We'll put all the decided on issues as a team in the sprint backlog, and then we'll start kind of doing estimates collectively, and we'll assign these tickets as needed. Again, this is kind of where you're just going to have everything for that sprint. Most likely sprints will be 2 weeks, that's subject to change as we need it, but really we want to keep a pretty strong cycle to keep everything consistent and flowing. So what you'll do basically, and we're still playing with this, I'm still figuring this out, by switching off of Jira back to ZenHub, I don't think we have automated workflow anymore, which is a bit unfortunate, but that's okay. We'll figure it out, and there is an API, so we'll figure out how we can do that. But at least for now, this means that there's not necessarily a branch naming structure until we figure that out as well. So what you'll do is you'll basically look at all this sprint backlog tickets, you'll move it over to in progress as you want to work on it. And then when it's in progress, you can name your branch accordingly. I would still recommend doing a similar naming structure to what we had before, issue / slid dash the number, because in the future we'll probably still want to tie these in. So that's basically how you'll do that. And then let me just go ahead. I'm going to make a demo issue. So this is how we're going to create new issues. Demo issue. Normally, okay, we're gonna run through this issue to kind of show you how it works. Normally, you can create issues just fine. I want you to be able to feel like that's perfectly okay. But for this one, let's see. Okay, so we're gonna put it in the sprint backlog just because I want to kind of skip all this. Normally, it goes into development by default. So sprint backlog here. Actually, we're going to go ahead and add some labels. Here are all the labels. You can kind of see it again. I'm going to call this one a spike because it's research, because we are actually researching ZenHub's features. You can add multiple labels. It's not an epic, but let's make it a high priority spike. Okay, so you see the two labels there. I'm going to assign it to myself. Yep. And then milestone, there's a couple milestones already, V2 UI and sprint candidate. We'll talk about this again, but sprint candidate is a specific milestone with no due date. What that will be is if at any moment we see issues while in a current sprint, if we see any issues that we want to work on next sprint, those will be sprint candidate issues. This also includes issues that we don't think we can complete by the end of this sprint. So sprint candidate is just kind of a small bucket to kind of help us get prepped for the next sprint, just to kind of make a note of that. There's no milestone for this demo ticket. Estimates, so the estimates are under the Fibonacci sequence. We'll learn how we want to estimate these, but typically 1 to 40. 1 is like you guys can bust it out in an hour. 2 is okay, a couple hours. 3 is like half day. 5 is maybe like we'll take the day. 8 is like it'll take the day and then a QA session on the next day. 13 is like it starts getting a bit bigger. 13 is like, oh, this may be like a full week. And then 21 is like, oh, this is going to be maybe the whole sprint just to do this one thing. Typically by the time we hit the range of 20, and especially if we hit 40, there should never be an issue with those estimate numbers. That means that we should break this out into much smaller issues. So we can work on these estimates together as we kind of work together and grow. For this one, it's super easy, so I'm going to just do 1. Not inside an epic, not really inside a release. Epics, again, we kind of discussed them, but we would add them here if we're going to bucket them that way. And then releases are set up based on when we are actually releasing these products to Foxconn. So let's just submit the new issue. You can kind of see it right away. Okay, so I've created the issue. This is actually a wrapper around GitHub issues. This is actually a GitHub issue now. You can see comments. You can even add and drag and drop images if you want. We can get really creative here. Basically now you can see it right in the sprint backlog. High priority spikes. So this is research. Spike is research. Let's go drag this in progress. That's it. So now you can see that this is in progress. So let's just create an example branch. I'll make sure to put that. That's under the slid repo. Yep. So let's rebase. I'm going to create a new branch, and because I want to keep the naming structure, I'm going to call this issue/slid362. So slid 362-demo ticket. Very simple. Branch naming doesn't really do much now again, but in the future we really want to tie that back in to do some automated workflow with our branches. Because really, I mean, I don't want you guys to have to move everything from to do to in progress every single time. If you create a branch with the right name and you push it, ticket should move. But for now it doesn't do that. Okay, so you push the branch. Let's just make a small change somewhere. So this spark point, it's not the one we want. Let's go to slid. Okay, so to do a small change really doesn't matter. Let's just do, so this is actually Adidas receiver code that's in our repo. It really doesn't affect us at all. Actually, I don't want to touch their code. It's more read-only. Okay, so let's just go to our slid application. Something small. Let's just say, let's get rid of this. Don't really need all that spacing here. Okay, so spacing for together. Simple, simple, simple. Commit and push. Okay, now this part you actually do have to go to GitHub. This is more tied into GitHub itself. So when you go to code, you'll see that you can merge this back in. Hey, there it is. It's a demo ticket. Now here is where the workflow ties in. So if you have the ZenHub Chrome extension, which everyone should have, note that we still have the Git hooks from if you've set that up before. This is for Jira. Don't worry about that. We'll clean that up later. That doesn't matter for now. So default pipeline. I'm going to go ahead and move this to review QA. What it means is basically all new pull requests created from this repository will be moved into the selected pipeline. By default, if you create a pull request, we want to move them into review. So this is a little confusing because a pull request is actually different than an issue. The reason for this is ZenHub decided that it is possible to have multiple PRs per one issue, which is totally fair. But you should be aware that you have to go down here. After you make sure the default pipeline is review QA, you have to make sure you can connect it with an issue. Just like that. Very simple. Okay, and then you see the changes, blah, blah, blah. Let's go ahead and open this pull request. So again, make sure the default pipeline is in review. Make sure you connect the ticket. I'm going to go ahead and add a reviewer. I'm going to just say the reviewer is Jesse. Again, could have labels here, but labels are being used in our board, so don't worry about that. Create pull request. Okay, it's going to let it build on CI. Notice that it has the checks to pass, it's connected to the issue, etc., etc. This is where you do the normal QA review. There are such things as dependencies. We'll discuss those at a later time as we need to, but basically issues can have dependencies, PRs can have dependencies, and things like this on issues. So that's a little bit more advanced. We're not going to worry about that for now. So let's go up here, let's go back to the board. If you notice, when you tied it to the issue, it automatically made a new nested number for the actual ticket, 363. That's the PR issue. That's going to be a little bit separate from the demo issue ticket. So there are issues and then there are PR issues. So PR numbers there can be many inside of an issue ticket. For you guys, just make sure you tie it to the ticket when you create a PR. Okay, so as we noticed, it already moved to review and QA. That's great. Okay, so normally you guys would wait for CI. You can go and you can see CI over here. It's running. Oh, it's actually, let's wait for it to be done. It's 4 minutes. It's probably going to be finished not too soon. I mean, not take too long, sorry. I think average CI time right now is about 5 minutes. Okay, so let me just kind of run through a little bit more here at the top while we're waiting for CI to build. So if you look at the top again, these are the labels. Mostly on the top here are all filters. You can filter by these labels. If we filter by high priority, here's all the high priority ones. You can also filter just to look at your repo if you want to remove the server stuff, or if you want to remove the Android stuff. So this is all just filtering. Helps you guys to figure out what you need to work on. A great one is if you want to filter by yourself. So for example, I can filter just by me. These do get stacked, these filters, so I can remove the high priority. I can look at, let's look at ZenHub for example. Let's remove me. Okay, so you can see all of ZenHub's tickets as we're testing out ZenHub, and then let's just filter by features. So then all those tech debt tickets go away. Very, very straightforward filtering. It's really, really clean and fast. So let's go ahead and remove all these filters. Clear filter. You can filter by anything. It's great. Assignees, milestones, epics, releases, estimates, if you want to just look at estimates with certain sizes, and authors as well. So typically we won't be using authors too much, I think, but again, it's just nice to have. So that's basically how it's going to work. Let's see how we're doing on this. Oops, I realized I made a mistake. We have to wait 5 more minutes because this was just the initial branch push. And this is actually the spacing change. Well, it built the initial branch push, so normally you guys would never do this, but I'm going to go ahead and just merge this because we know it's just spacing, mostly for demo purposes. Okay, so normally merge pull request, every time you merge a pull request should be deleted the branch. We want to keep our branches clean, we don't want a lot of branches. Okay, so that's merged. Now that it's merged, we can go back up here. Well, that's his work. So let's go back up here. Okay. Let's just refresh the board. Let's see what happens. Okay. Now these are live updates, but sometimes it doesn't always update live. Okay, so cool. Now you can see that the PR has a little icon that says this is a closed icon. That means that the PR has been closed. It's worth noting that right now, just closing a PR doesn't move the ticket automatically. This is because by ZenHub's default style, PRs can have multiple, or issues can have multiple PRs. So what that means is that whoever does the merging, probably me, will be responsible for saying, hey, does that PR solve all of the problems for this ticket? If so, I'm going to go ahead and drag this to done. I get a lot of notifications as well. Sorry for the noise. So basically when it's done, we're going to leave it as done. The reason why we want to keep it in done and not closed, there is a closed as well, is again because done is going to be what we talk about at the end of every sprint. At the end of every sprint, we will then move done to closed, and then you'll start with an empty done for the next sprint. So that's basically it. That's kind of the flow. You can always select issues, and you can look at more details. You can edit, you can close issues, things like this. So because this is not technically part of the sprint, and I'm just showing you guys a demo, I'm going to go ahead and close this issue completely. Now you can see it's closed. This is closed as far as GitHub issues goes. That's like truly closed. You can always reopen closed issues, but that's it. So that's basically how it's going to work. Just a couple more things. You can always search, and you can always do new issues, milestones, new pipelines, which you guys should never really need, new releases, which again you should never really need. Basically, just it's going to be focused on the issues for you guys. You can adjust your notification settings here, and that's basically it. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Hopefully this covers everything. Again, this board lives here at app.zenhub.com. It also exists directly into your GitHub. It ties directly in. We can really quickly, just one more thing, we can quick switch to the server, just so you guys can see So this is the server. It's empty right now because there's no code. I'm just setting it up for Rudy when he's ready to start. But then here's the board for that. Notice his board already has a couple of, so actually his board, these are both repos. We can just kind of hide that. This is his board. Just a couple epics right now, and then I set everything up to be exactly the same. One last note on the server side is we do have a few labels, 2 new labels just for server, and that's basically because we want to differentiate between front-end server work and back-end server work. Because they're under the same repo, we're going to still keep them under the same repo, under the same board. Code lives here. But the label, here we go. We're just going to have 2 ones. Back-end, specific issues, front-end, specific issues. That's it. That just helps us keep track. That's about it. Cool. Well, I think that's everything, guys. Again, let me know if you have questions. I know it's a bit of a long video, but hopefully this covers all the questions you guys have about ZenHub and getting started and using it. Just ping me as you guys start using it with any questions you have.